Welcome everyone to this session, Women Environmental Defenders Knitting Webs of Solidarity. We are live streamed today and we have a live audience as well. Thank you all for being here. It isn't a good time to be a woman environmental defender, but we have no choice. It is our obligation to stand up and continue fighting. If we don't do it, who will? It is not about our lives only, but that of the next generation. This is a quote of an indigenous woman from the Philippines. And today we're going to talk about women environmental defenders. I'm very happy to have Diana sitting next to me, being able to join us here live. And I have two guests online who will join us as well. But before I will introduce my guests, let me first paint you a picture of what we're going to talk about today. And I will start off with a quote from Judy Pasimio, founder of the women organization LILAC in the Philippines. The government has been actively trying to silence us through red tagging or labeling activists as terrorists, rebels, and killings of activists and community leaders. Impunity for these acts of violence is being institutionalized through the anti-terrorist law. Just last year, a series of killings of indigenous people has happened. And I am sitting here with so much fear, but the fear that I am feeling is nothing compared to the threats these indigenous women are facing day in, day out. I am afraid of the threats thrown at us on social media. They are afraid of the guns actually pointed at them at every corner. And at this Congress, there are many sessions about defenders of protecting those at the forefront. Often the ones living in faraway places where their fight takes place, where there isn't anyone who can see what's actually happening on the ground. And today we're going to talk with a special group of environmental defenders, women defenders. And as hard as it is for every defender to stand at the front line, this fight is even more difficult for women, let alone indigenous women. Because serious gender dynamics are at play. And also in this context. There are often constructs around the role of women. For instance, if a woman is fighting at the forefront, she's a bad mother, or she's being ostracized, or she is not allowed to take up that position. For instance, through gender-based violence is a big issue to silence women. So in order for women to stand up, it often takes a whole different and additional myriad of challenges that need to be overcome. And IUCN NL is working with a lot of these women and women groups. And today I'm very humbled that we have three remarkable women all standing in a line of fire with us today, who will share their stories and their context. And these contexts are all quite different, but I think there are many similarities that we can find. So first of all, we will hear the story of Diana Nabiruma, who is sitting next to me. She's working for Afiego. She comes from Uganda. And she will tell you more about the women movement and youth movement who are countering oil developments in Uganda. Then we will take you all the way to Bolivia to, to Ruth Alipas from Contiacap, and she's from the Bolivian Amazon, and she will tell her story, how she is fighting to protect her forest from a lot of different influences that want to have other plans with that forest. And finally, Che will take you to the Philippines. She's a feminist working for LILAC, also working on many issues around mining and standing up for women and women groups. So I think without further ado, Diana, I give you the floor.
Okay, thanks, Frederick. And let me take this off. Good afternoon, everyone. Is everyone okay? Oh, that's great to hear. And it's such a pleasure to see you all here. Thanks for coming so that we can have this important discussion about the wins and the challenges that women environmental rights defenders face. As I was introduced, my name is Diana Nabiruma, and I work for a nonprofit called Afiego. Afiego is based in Uganda, and we work with communities, indigenous communities, and particularly women and youth to ensure that our environmental resources are protected. They are under immense pressure from sugarcane growing and oil and gas development or exploitation. So allow me to tell you a story, because my people from Uganda are known for their storytelling. We are an oral nation. Before I came here, before I traveled to France, I took an evening walk. I like to take these walks every evening in order to unwind from the day. And oftentimes, I also need to take these walks in order to get one with nature and to take from nature, for nature to revive me, because we work in such a difficult environment in Uganda. It's, there's a lot of civic repression, especially against people who are demanding for rights to be protected, for communities' rights to be protected, and for the environment to be conserved. So if I felt a lot of anxiety and fear during the day, I go out and take an evening walk so that Mother Nature can revive me and allay my fears and reduce my anxiety. So there's a particular track that I love. I live in the city, unfortunately, so there's a lot of noise and a lot of pollution. But there's a particular track that I love where the land has been left to grow wild. It's, a small patch of land, but very, very important. And every time I am on my walk and I go through, that piece of land on that track, I feel that my heart gets lighter, and I feel that my steps also get lighter, and I feel a certain sense of warmth. Nature is very restorative, nature is very instructive, and I always feel that when I walk through that patch. And, before I came here on Thursday, when I took my walk, I thought to myself, it was the first time I was thinking about it, yet I'm such a love of nature. I thought to myself, nature is such a good friend, such a very faithful friend. We have abused nature. We produce a lot of carbon, we are cutting down our forests, we are degrading our wetlands, but nature, especially in our context, and perhaps in your context as well, is still a friend who provides, who teaches, and who ensures that we are okay. And when I thought about this, and I thought about the anxieties that I face day in, day out, I thought to myself, because sometimes you think about, should I quit the work that I am doing? Because there is a lot of pressure. Just before I had taken that walk, the Friday before, the Ugandan government had tried to close down our organization, because Afiego is one of the few organizations that are very vocal and are demanding that the oil and gas exploitation activities that are ongoing in the Albertine Graben is very eco-sensitive. It contains 70% of our national parks, of Uganda's national parks. It contains 8 out of 15 of our forests. It contains over 50, it's a habitat for over 50% of the bird species in Africa. And it also has amphibian species, plant species, so very biodiverse and very important. But because of the pressure under which we work, sometimes you think, should I quit so that, there is less pressure on me? But when I was walking on that Thursday, and I felt how beautiful nature is, how instructive, how restorative, how giving nature is, I felt that no, it cannot be done. You cannot quit. You need to defend nature. You need to fight for nature, because nature also fights for you to ensure that you're provided for and that you're well. So, the decision was made for me, and I was happy that I was coming here to share with fellow women, because sometimes now, both men and women, old and young, who demand that natural resources or environmental resources and biodiversity are protected are looked as enemies by our Ugandan government, who must be silenced. We face intimidation, we are arrested, we are threatened, our bank accounts get frozen. So there is a lot of pressure that we experience. And this is true for both the men and the women. But when you're a woman, it is much harder. Frederick talked about the fact that, you know, there are gendered roles, especially in our society. Now, I love Uganda. Uganda is a very beautiful country. In fact, I usually tell everyone, you know, everyone needs to visit Uganda. It should be on your bucket list. But, you know, it's a patriarchal society and we still have these gendered roles. So women and men play different roles. The roles of women are largely in the domestic sphere. You're expected to look after children, to provide food for the home, get it and cook it from the garden, especially if you're from the rural community, to ensure that there is safe water in your home, to ensure that the people you're living with are healthy. Now, you know, when you're a woman and you have to play these roles, before I came again, I told Frederick, there's a lady, very strong lady, who is based in an area where the East African crude oil pipeline is supposed to be built in southern Uganda. She's a strong lady and always fighting for women. So in April, we met with communities and we're sensitizing them. These are your rights. Their land is being acquired for the eco project or the East African crude oil pipeline. So we were sensitizing the women and we were telling them, you know, these are your rights as a woman, these are your rights as a landowner. But because the developers of the eco, who include you know, the Ugandan government, the Tanzanian government, CNOOC, which is China National Offshore Oil Corporation, and Total Energies, feel that when you meet with communities, they may get too empowered and make demands that are impossible for a project to go on. Usually we have people, spies that are planted in our meetings, or sometimes even the developers themselves send representatives. So we were at a meeting in southern Uganda, and someone who introduced himself as being from the Ugandan government, and a lady who introduced herself as being from one of the oil companies that are developing the ECOP, came into the meeting. Now, a colleague of mine told me that, you know, someone had, you know, I don't want to say this, someone had a pistol, not those two people that came, but someone who had accompanied them had a pistol. Now, the lady, the strong lady that I told you about, she's based in the communities. She was the one who was taking us around. She said, we need to end this meeting and leave. And I told her, no, it's very important. The information that we've come to share is very important, and we aren't doing anything wrong. Our constitution empowers us and gives us the right to assemble freely. Before we came for the meetings, we met with the district leaders. Now we have a repressive law called the Ngo Act, which requires that before you can work with communities, you need to engage with district leaders. That's a way of ensuring that, you know, civil society organizations and non-profit companies don't interact too much with companies without the oversight of the central and local governments. So I told the lady, she's a mother of twins, and in my language, we call mothers of twins Nalongo. I told her, Nalongo, or mother of twins, we adhered to all the rules. We spoke to the district leaders. We can stay and meet with the communities. But she told me, no, we need to leave because I'm a mother of twins. If I'm arrested and I'm thrown into a police cell, even if it is for 2 days, who will look after my children? Her twins were not yet a year at that time. And you know, that made me think about the special challenges that women environmental defenders face. While a man, no one wants to be imprisoned or go to a police cell. Why? But you know, a man doesn't have the burden of thinking, who will look after my household if I'm in prison? A woman has to think about these issues. And that means that when you think about this, who will look after my children, who will provide food for my home, sometimes women will stop themselves and not participate. So we find a challenge of mobilizing women to be more active, to demand better, because they know that when they do, there could be special repercussions that they will face. And then also culturally, women aren't expected to speak up. Now this is changing, especially in the urban areas. So thanks to all who've been fighting for this is changing. But some cultures still demand that women are kept in the private sphere and not in the public sphere. So in 2019, we had a meeting where Total Energies is operating. It's in northern Uganda. We're going to extract oil from that area. And we were meeting with cultural leaders. And about 2 ladies, out of a meeting of over 15, only 2 ladies participated. And one of the ladies was very vocal and wanted to speak up. We were speaking about how do we protect communities' environmental resources, because for us, we really, in Uganda, we depend on our environmental resources to make a living. And how do we protect communities' rights? And a lady wanted to speak up, but you know, she kept being told, you're a woman, you don't speak when chiefs around. So you also find that because women have been conditioned, you have to be in the domestic sphere, it is difficult, even when we have community meetings, to have women participating, to have women speaking up, and you have to go the extra mile to ensure that they speak up. So as I conclude, okay, as I conclude, you know, I'm happy to have shared this with you today, and I'm happy that I was given the opportunity to reflect on the challenges, the special challenges that women environmental defenders face. And I would want, especially in our countries, which are civically and culturally repressive, I would want to have all of us to continue having these ongoing reflections, whatever reflections that we have, let us look at them through a gendered lens. How do we improve the environment for women and environmental defenders? How do we improve women participation in the governance of natural resources? And I have a few recommendations. In Uganda, we are fighting to bring down some laws that are repressive, and these laws also contribute to women that are repressive civically. They make the civic space difficult, and we are fighting to ensure that these laws are struck down and that they are no longer operationalized, or that certain sections of the law are taken out of the law. And we need your support. If we email, if we engage, wherever you are, if you can speak to your governments, we've seen that that is very powerful. When the Ugandan government tried to close down a Fiego just last month on August 20th, it was voices from the Netherlands, from France, from the US, from elsewhere that put a lot of pressure on our Ugandan government, which started backtracking and speaking a soft language. Yet previously they were saying, we've halted your activities effective immediately. So when you hear that something is happening in Uganda where civic space is going to be closed, know that women will suffer more than the other groups will, and demand that civic space is kept open. There is also a motion 39. If you're an IUCN member, the motion is about improving civic space for environmental and human rights defenders. I request that if you're a member, please vote, because IUCN's voice matters a lot. And when you vote and the motion is adopted, we will ensure, at least we will see that something is being done that we can use to ensure that we improve the civic space in our country. Thank you very much. I've spoken at length. I feel like I've used up more than my time. So thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you for your personal story. And it's clear that you are storytellers in Uganda, from what you said. And yeah, indeed, it's also what you said with Diana told about Angela, so one of the women defenders resisting one of the oil blocks, and she was really at the forefront at the movement building of the movement for women and for youth. And still with all these difficulties, well, how they persevered with stopping that oil block. I think that was also one of the key wins of the women movement who really achieved this. Thank you so much, Diana, for this, and also of reminding everyone of the resolution that's still out. Shall we move on to the next speaker for now? Ruth, are you there?
I am here, Frederic. Thank you.
That's great. And the connection is working.
It's working, apparently.
That is great news. Well, I think everyone is very eager to hear your story about Bolivia and how you are fighting for the forest. So take it away, Ruth.
Thank you, Frederic, and thank you, Diana, for such a strong, I don't know, story about your life and other women fighting for the nature. And thank you also to IUCN Netherlands to make possible to be here today. And from Bolivia, I apologize if my English is not that good as Diana's, but I'm going to do my best. And please, if we can, well, first of all, I would like to say I am Uchupiamona, indigenous woman from the Bolivian Amazon. My community is inside a national park as Mariri. And so since 2016, we are defending 6 territories in our region, in the Amazon region, against construction of 2 mega dams that will be destroy all our territories. But please let me talk about more and how we are fighting in Bolivia against the extractivism. Please, if we can start there.
Sorry, well, no, het is de andere. Moet hem omwisselen. Sorry. Maybe in the meantime, Ruth, you can, well. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I just want to tell you that women defending indigenous territories in Bolivia is really defending our way of life, and how we found through Contiocap, please the next. So how we found to defend our territories since the government for the last 15 years now, almost 16 years of the mass government and ahead the Evo Morales government, they start to destroy all the legal and representative organization in Bolivia that they should represent indigenous peoples in Bolivia, and they cooptated, they destroyed, they divided, and so these organizations were working together with the government to get in our territories. So what happened in Bolivia is the people, the local people, the women, particularly the women in Bolivia, Contiocap is based on the 80% of women defenders from all the territories in 4 macro regions that exist in Bolivia: the Chaco region, the Highland region, the Valley region, and the Amazonian region. So we organized this organization, national coordinator, to defend our territories and our protected areas. So this is the large organization, a national organization that we, as a strategy that we found to make hear our voices from the territories, from the from the women, that we are the most affected in our territories. So since 2018, we are working to put together, as in Bolivia, usually they used to think that we are divided in the highlands and lowland people, indigenous people, but we are saying that it's not true. We are together defending our territories because in all the territories, indigenous territories and protected areas, we are having the extractivism. Please, the next slide. So the environment, for us, defending the environment, it is really defending our way of life. And you can see this picture, and this is my village, my small Chupiamona village. This is and you can see we are in the valley of Tuichi River. So Tuichi River for us used to be our road, the way how we connect to other communities or to other urban communities or towns, big towns. And the forest for us is just as the river is a source of food, of water, of air, of just what we need to live. So that's what we need. That's why we need to keep it. That's why we need to take care, because the nature provide us all the necessary to live. For example, here we don't need to pay we don't need to pay for the water. We don't need to pay for that services. We have the river to just take our food and or travel or to make our activities. For example, my community started to work with ecotourism in the 1990s. So for us, the river is very essential, and our forest is very essential to continue our lives. So defending the environment is defending our way of life, and we were the most effective protectors of the nature. Please, the next slide. So these spaces are also the sustaining our culture and knowledges, where our elders can teach us how to live, how to use the resources, how to respect, how important was for them protecting our territories that they were keeping for us, the next generation. So that's a natural transmission of the responsibility to take care of the nature also, and our spaces, our way of life. Next, please. And also our territories are the sustainable activities led by women, for example, using the nature or taking from the nature. For example, here are women producing honey, or just for a healthy food, and producing without contamination, without any agrotoxic products, and we are producing. That's how also we take care of the health of our community. Next, please. And extractivism threatening our way of life. Please, next. For example, here, mining activities drying our lakes. This is the Popo Lake in the highlands, that the mining was just contributed to dry the Deadless Lake and affecting the way of life of the communities that used to have the farm fields in the border of the lakes. So when the communities don't have water, they have to leave their communities, and they just go to the big cities to be a part of the poor groups of the people in the big cities. So the mining of the extractivism makes poor in our territories, taking out from us just our resources as fundamental resources like the water, so we can continue living in our territories. Please, next. For example, in 2019, just the government has, I don't know, they came with a law that is allowed to burn the forest, and they burn almost 6 million of hectares in the Chiquitania area, which is a transition to the Amazonian forest, burning our forest for agribusiness, to plant soya plants, or this kind of mono agricultural, right? And that destroying really, for example, in the community, in the Chiquitania area, they just burn communities, the houses and the small rivers that where people used to have their water. So that's that kind of destruction, just to promote the extractivism in Bolivia, is destroying our life, but particularly for women. Before that, please, before. And no, next. And for example, here, these mountains for us, for the local communities, are sacred mountains, and they just are burning everything. And that's under the protection of the government and the companies and the agribusiness companies. They are just to destroy the community. Next, please. They are dredging also and poisoning our rivers in the Amazon region, for example, poisoning with the mercury. And the local people used to do very low impact mining. And now they just, we have this huge structure there. They are dragging the rivers 24 hours a day and almost 365 days per year. And they are poisoning our fish, and they are using our space. They are destroying the sceneries. They are taking our resources, like the water in the rivers. So they are taking everything through mining in the Amazon. They are really destroying. They are just I don't know, taking the river for other places that if they want to. So they really. And that's the law in Bolivia, that anyone come here, and we have here Chinese company or Brazilian companies or Colombian companies that they are destroying our rivers. Please, next. And the same in the Chaco region is the oil exploration. And the women again are the one from fire and just facing the police or the militaries that the government is sending. So it's not just violating our rights, getting in our territories without free consultation, but also they are coming with violence against the women, or the women that are defending their territories. Next, please. So those are some of the faces of the main defenders, environmental defenders in Bolivia, from different territories. For example, the Timnis, the Aguaragüe National Park, the Tariquia, the Lago Popó, the Chiquiacar, Rositas. Rositas is a complex of mega dams that they are pretending to build in the Santa Cruz region. And in my region, the Chapete Bala, they just started again. They just signed the agreement with the Indigenous representative organization, and they are attacking us because we are defending our territories. As a particular might to me, because we just say that the government is using the Indigenous representatives to start again this project. When we stopped then in 2016 with a vigil, we just take out the companies from our territories, and now they are starting again. So when we start to say something, they are going to just say, we are not representative, or we are not the person to have the rights to defend the territories. The next, please. And again, the women leading we are the women in the roads, on the bridge, on the rivers. And sometimes we just talk, and we are putting our bodies, and we are putting our hungry, our thirst, sometimes our tears to defend our territories. Next, please. Yeah, women leadership in submission times, and we have to get out sometimes, and we have to work in the territories, keep trying to keep the unity of our communities. As this, for example, this is in the left side, you can see Highland women, but for example, here it was a woman I really, really admire, because they courage to march almost 700 kilometers from Sucre to La Paz to defend their territories. A woman who has 73 years old, and they are the base of the community, and they are the base to keep together to the community, and they are supporting, and they are sustaining the defending the territories. And for people, women like me, going out also, that's a challenge, a really big challenge, to get out from our country to these spaces that we don't know, we don't understand, like going to the UN, which is a very complicated system, but we have to go. We have to break that barriers for us, and we have to go to defend our territories. Next, please. So just some recommendation, or I don't know, please. We know that outside of Bolivia, there is an image that Bolivia is the paradise for indigenous peoples, and particularly because we had an indigenous president. But please stop saying that, because in Bolivia, the indigenous people, we are really threatened. As you can see, the environment is being destroyed, and the women we are defending. So that couldn't be a paradise for us. And just we want to keep our territories, because it's the way to protect the environment, and protecting our territories is also protecting our children, that they are going, the next generation, to keep taking care of the environment, to keep taking care of the territories. And not just for us, not just for indigenous people. We are taking care of the environment for all the forms of life that is in the nature, and for all the people, on all the creatures that need really a territory. They need water, they need air, they need eat from these territories and the environment. So that's my the history from defending territories is defending our way of lives also. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That was really powerful. And as you say, defending our environment is defending our way of life. In essence, what you were saying, and especially in your context, it's a big fight against so many powerful players, against the agro commodities, mining, logging, and it's not an easy thing to do, especially standing up against these forces. Thank you. I would say, because to move on to the next speaker, and that we wait with the questions at the end, and then we can ask them to everyone. So can I please ask Jay to join us?
Hello.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, everyone. Good evening from the Philippines. I am Che. And I'm so happy, and I'm very grateful for the invitation from IUCN, because we take opportunities like this where we are very grateful for opportunities like this where we can share the stories, our stories as women human rights defenders, but most of all the stories of the indigenous women, environmental human rights defenders that we are working with. Thank you very much, Diana and Ruth. I'm so happy to be sharing this platform with you. You have shared so many stories that is almost the same with what is happening in our country. I think this is not the slide that I have prepared, but yeah, as you know, the Philippines right now is quite popular in a very bad way because of the condition and because of the situation of the human rights and environmental human rights defenders. That is experience that we are experiencing right now. As you know, in the 2020 Global Witness Report, the Philippines is number 2 or the second of the deadliest country for land and environmental human rights defenders. In 2019, we were number 1. So in the world, we're number 2, but in Asia, we are number 1. And this is something that we are not proud of. By the way, I am Che. I am from LILAC, Purple Action for Indigenous Women's Rights. We are a collective of feminists, women's rights advocates, women's rights defenders, and indigenous women who are working together so that indigenous women's rights will be heard, will be recognized. As I was saying, the Philippines is we are an archipelago. We are a country in Southeast Asia that I am so sure that all of you know it's very rich in natural resources. We have been, as short history of why we are here right now and why indigenous women and environmental human rights defenders are really facing all these challenges just so, as what Diana and Ruth have shared, just so that we can defend our natural resources. For years, we have been colonized, and the reason why we have been colonized is because of the rich natural resources that we have. And during all those years of colonization, the ancestral domains, the indigenous people's domains, were spared for such a long time. But when our country was open and our government followed this development model, which actually the trend is, liberalization, looking into our natural resources as capital for investments and corporate development. These are stories that are the same with what is happening in Uganda and what is happening in Bolivia and what is happening in so many other indigenous communities around the world. You would see that, as what Diana said, as what Ruth said, ancestral domains face a lot of development aggressions. The so-called economic development that governments like our governments are pushing, which are actually encroaching ancestral domains, destroying the environment with mining, commercial plantations, hydropower plants, agribusiness, all of this under the guise of bringing development to countries such as the Philippines. But in the context of indigenous women, this is not the kind of development that they want. This is not the kind of development that would bring them food sovereignty, food security, and as what Ruth was sharing, a development that can sustain their culture and indigenous knowledge. With all of this, the depletion of natural resources, of course, both men and women are greatly affected and impacted when mining would go into ancestral domains, into communities, destroying water, flattening mountains, just like what is happening here, particularly Didipio, Nueva Vizcaya, where the very first mining permit was issued by our government, which actually now has been renewed. So there are a lot of things that would really be affected when development aggressions encroach communities. But as Diana and Ruth have said, women face different dimensions of impacts and discriminations. As we all know, with the feminization of care, with what Ruth was saying, with what Diana was sharing, that women already, because of the patriarchal society where we are, and same with our country, and same with the indigenous communities that we are working with here in Lilac, with the feminization of care, women are already faced with so many burdens. And here comes a very big corporation encroaching communities, destroying the water, polluting the water, flattening the mountains. This would add up to the already difficult life of an indigenous woman. So that is why women, the indigenous women, would never take this, as Ruth said, they will not just sit down, because we are now talking about their lives. If projects such as mining, hydropower plants, dams would come into their communities, taking away their lands, giving them a very high feeling of insecurity, indigenous women here in my country, in the Philippines, stood up. They stood up and they pushed back. What are the challenges that we are facing right now? As I have shared earlier, we are currently one of the deadliest countries for land and environmental human rights defenders. This has been happening before, and this is intensifying, and this has been intensified right now with this Duterte administration. I'm sure each one of you right now who are with us have heard stories and news about the crazy president that we have here in my country. When he was very popular when he was elected, he had this false promise that he would tax mining companies to death. But in years, it has the revelations. Well, for us in Lilac, it is not a surprise, because from the very beginning, we were against this misogynistic president. And now that everything is unraveling, there are a lot of revelations that everything was just plain fake news. During his presidency, renewal of mining permits happened. Executive Order 130 happened. What is Executive Order 130? This is an order lifting the banning or the moratorium on open pit mines, of new open pit mining permits here in my country. And this has brought a chilling effect to all the indigenous women that we are working with, because now it's becoming a free for all corporations. All corporations are welcome to their communities. Not only that, just like what Diana said, here in our country, civic repression against repression of women human rights defenders and environmental human rights defenders is really widely felt in the communities with the passage of the anti-terror law. And for the information of everyone, the first groups in our country who were affected by the anti-terrorist law came from an Aita indigenous group in Luzon. So, it is, as what Frederick shared, Judy is my colleague. She said it is a very hard time for women human rights and environmental rights defenders now here in my country, because you are being attacked in different forms from all directions. The social media, when you go to the communities, on a daily basis, almost on a daily basis, me and my sisters in Lilac receive messages. We receive information from our community partners, from the Indigenous women leaders, on how they are being red tagged. And red tag means you are accused of being an insurgent, of being an anti-government, because they are very dedicated into standing up for their rights. This government, the Duterte administration, have established it's like a program. It's NTF-LCAP, the National Task Force to Eliminate Local Insurgencies in the communities. But these are used against indigenous communities who are standing against mining, against logging, against dams. And these government programs are being used against indigenous women human rights defenders. Just a few days ago, we had a talk with a Mamanwa leader here in Mindanao, because she's afraid for her life. She's afraid for her family, for her community, because she's been included in a list that the government is saying that they are part of the National People's Army. But actually, they are just working, and they are just doing something for their community to protect their ancestral domain against mining. So these are the stories that we have every day here in our country. And, especially when COVID happened, as we all know, the context of indigenous communities, they are in geographically isolated communities. So communication is very, very hard in these communities. When COVID-19 happened, our government decided to implement a militaristic approach to address this global pandemic. And these quarantine protocols were used to control the movement of communities, especially in indigenous communities. They were not allowed to go out of their communities. They were not allowed even to go to towns to sell their agricultural products because of the so-called quarantine protocols, not allowing people's movement. But militaries are allowed to go inside indigenous communities because they said they are, doing operations against people who are against the government. So one indigenous woman who's fighting against a very large coffee plantation asked us, who is this quarantine protocols for? I am being harassed on a daily basis. I am forced to say something, to confess on something that is not true. When they said they were not, people should stay in their homes, but these militaries are coming into our
sorry
communities.
because we're running out of time with this session. Thank you so much for your words, and also you really make it very clear and realistic how frightening the situation is in the Philippines as we speak. And as you rightfully said, how many similarities there are all over the world in these repressed spaces. And I cannot imagine how frightening that must be. And also what I would like to point out, also Lilac organized 2 resistor dialogues, which is a session in East Asia, where they made sure that women fighters were able to join together to discuss these topics. As you can see here as well, the recognition of what everyone is going through, the issues, what they're running up against are so similar and have so much overlap. And this resistors dialogue, I think there were about 20 women, if I'm correct, who got together, who really shared and, strategized how do you deal with this? How do you deal, when you're living in a paternalistic society, where do you get your sense of justice from? Because it's usually not accessible, and because the law is not you know, working for you in a equal, neutral way. So I would like, because we have 1 minute left, formally, I hope we can extend it a few more minutes. I would like to ask Whitney, because I'm very happy to hear that Whitney from Kenya is here also in the audience. She's also, I think, a ranger in Kenya. I just want to give the floor to you for some words.
So, thank you. I am Whitney Sengwer from Kenya. I come from an indigenous community called the Sengwer. We are hunter-gatherers, and as everyone has said, conservation is our way of life. We live in the forest, and we as women also have challenges closely related to what everyone has presented on. And I would just like to pick maybe where Jay left. When COVID happened, there was this cry from women from the forest. We are not getting information about the pandemic. We don't know really what's happening. We cannot access the response mechanisms that have been put in place by the government, because we all know indigenous people are always marginalized in everything, information, resources, and every other thing. So those were some of the issues that were coming up. Women were calling on us. I work at an organization that defends human rights defenders. So there was that need from the women in the forest. This is my mother, this is my sister, this is my aunt calling, saying, we need something. We need to access maybe the soap to wash our hands. We need masks and all these other things, because our government was not giving us these resources. And that is one related to COVID. And the biggest challenge is when my community was living in the forest. Since time immemorial, our great-grandfathers and everyone else used to live in the forest. But in around 2010, our Kenyan government gazetted our ancestral home as a forest reserve. So this means our people had to be evicted from the forest. And this means people will have to move from the forest, and they were not given a place to live. So the eviction started, and during the evictions, there were gross human rights violations to people, well, my community now, but the most affected were the women and youth and children, because we had cases of sexual violence to women. The men had to move from that place and go to town, maybe move away, because when the guards were evicting people, homes were being burnt, the granaries that we stored our foods were burnt down. So we were losing food, we were losing our clothing, our animals were being driven away from the forest, you know. So we were losing all these things, in the sense that the whole thing is conservation. You're moving people who understand what the forest needs to a place where there's no forest. You're risking these people to lose their language, their culture, their way of life, and everything that they have always identified with. So this is what is happening back at home. My community is living with uncertainties. Last year during COVID, when COVID came, homes were burnt down 2 times. More than 100 homes were burnt down. This year, in May, 80 homes were burnt. And it is so sad, because they don't only burn your home, they burn your food as well. So you lose your home, you lose your food, you lose your documents, and you lose all these other things. Why? Because conservation. What is this conservation? We say indigenous people are custodians of traditional knowledge. Why not give these people an opportunity to take care of these forests? We know the early signs. Our great-grandfathers passed the knowledge to us. We have always read the early warning signs. If we know there's going to be a prolonged drought, we know how to adapt to it. If they knew, and that knowledge has been passed on to each and every other indigenous person, right? We all know when it's going to rain for so long, we know what to do. When discussions about climate change are happening, indigenous people are not included. Women are excluded from that table. We always say the narrative, nothing about us without us, but what is really happening is everything about us without us. We are crying for women to be on these tables. We are crying for indigenous women to be led to be conservationists. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, Winnie, for this. Shake this out of your hand, and it's really yeah, no word for that. And indeed, also, you know, the fortress conservation is something which is should be avoided at all costs, and always inclusive conservation in which especially indigenous communities are heard and are participating and part of the decision making. I think we're a little over time. I actually have one question to all of you. Please keep it brief. And that is, what do you need? What do you need from us, NGOs, governments? What is it that could help out with this fight? Diana first.
Okay, thank you. I had indicated, but perhaps to say again, for those who are IUCN members, vote for motion 39 to be passed, because our governments do listen and sort of respect the IUCN motions, and then engage your governments. Talk about the repressive space that people in Uganda, Bolivia, the Philippines, Kenya, very sad what's happening there, are working under, and ensure that your governments engage the Ugandan government to improve, Ugandan, Kenyan, and all other governments to improve. Our governments listen to us less than they listen to foreign governments. So if you can do that, we'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana, for this. Ruth, in a few words, what would you recommend, or what would you need?
I absolutely agree with Diana. And I think your government has also the chance to make understand our government that respecting the rights in Bolivia, it is respecting the life also, and they have to respect. And they are using the pandemic as an excuse to destroy our territories. And they are saying we need to recover the economy, but the economy can't be on top of the rights of the life of the people. So please ask to your government, maybe you can make possible and amplify our voices, what we are saying today, and just help us to make understand to our governments they have to respect the rights, women rights, children rights, and all the people rights, and the nature. The nature is for all of us. For all of us, it's our way of life. So if we don't respect that, we are not. They don't represent people. They are in the capability to be in the top, on the head of the countries that they are really destroying. That will be my point. Thank you.
Very clear. Thank you so much, Ruth. And Jay, final words to you.
In addition to, you know, helping us, urging your governments to engage our government, just as Diana and Ruth said, you can also help. What we need actually is a support for women human rights, environmental human rights defenders, for you to continue to support platform to amplify voices. This is not only on helping, providing capacity building to women environmental human rights defenders, but in the context that we are in now, we need a lot of help in addressing digital divide, because that is something, you know, as what the young woman said there from Kenya, the exclusion of information is a very big thing. So support for platforms for women environmental human rights defenders, but also it is also very important that with the intensity of threats that we are facing, we also need a really effective protection, a holistic protection on emergency assistance for women environmental human rights defenders. I mean, amplifying the voice is really a great help, but also practically and logistically, we have to do something to help women environmental human rights defenders who are already at risk. So I think, Frederick, these are some of the additions that I would want to recommend for all of you who are continuing to support women environmental human rights defenders in all that we do. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for this. And I think on this note, I would end. The only thing, we recently published a publication on women leadership. In the stand, you see a QR code in which you can get the report. And there you read the stories of Ruth, also of Diana Inafiego, and of Judy of Lilac, if you want to know more about these incredible brave women. So I would really recommend to read. Could you also show the slide so people at home could still click the QR code? Thanks. And with this, I would like to end this session. Thank you all so much for being here, for sharing your incredible, difficult, powerful, frightening, but also strong stories. And big round of applause for the guests here today, and Winnie, and for the audience. Thank you for being here, and thank you.